Taehyung sat alone in his cramped studio, the silence pressing on him heavier than the rolls of fabric stacked against the walls. A single desk lamp glowed faintly on the cluttered table, throwing shadows over unfinished sketches and crumpled papers that lay like casualties of his failed attempts. He dragged his pencil across the page again, trying to give shape to the idea in his head, but the lines came out wrong, too stiff, too ordinary. With a frustrated exhale, he tossed the paper aside, where it joined the growing mountain of rejected designs. The screen of his phone lit up, breaking the stillness. A message blinked from one of his suppliers. "Sorry, Mr. Kim, with sales this low, it's no longer practical to keep working with you." Taehyung's chest tightened. Another door closed. He set the phone face down on the table and leaned back, eyes shutting as if he could block out more than just the dim light. But the silence didn't stay silent. In his head, voices rose, sharp and familiar. Why can't you be like your siblings and handle real business instead of this? Hobby, his mother's words laced with disappointment. V's teasing laugh. "Hyung, even your dog wouldn't wear those clothes. Just give up already." Jia's cold dismissal. "You're 30, Appa. When will you finally grow up?" Taehyung pressed the heels of his palms against his ears, his jaw clenched so hard it ached. He wanted to shut them out, wanted one single night where their voices didn't chase him, but they had carved themselves into him too deep. His eyes fell on the sketch in front of him, a men's suit with bold, modern lines, stitched with a vision only he could see. Slowly, his fingers traced the pencil strokes as though the design were fragile, something he could lose if he wasn't careful. "No," he whispered to himself. "I'll prove them wrong. One day, they'll see." The phone buzzed again. This time, it was the family group chat. His eyes skimmed the messages about tomorrow's dinner with the Lee family. Business talk, marriage talk, nothing that concerned him. His name appeared only once, and even then, not directly to him. "Make sure Taehyung dresses properly. We don't want embarrassment." He let out a bitter laugh, eldest son of the family, yet treated like the unwanted guest. Shoving the phone aside, Taehyung leaned back in his chair and stared at the cracked ceiling above him. Another dinner where I'll sit quiet, ignored. "Just don't humiliate yourself, Taehyung." His voice was low, almost mocking himself. The Kims were a dynasty in their own right. Their name carried weight in every boardroom across Korea, etched into skyscrapers, luxury hotels, and endless streams of revenue. Mr. and Mrs. Kim had built their empire with an iron grip, ruthless decisions, and sharp business instincts that left competitors trembling. To the world, they were the perfect example of success, for brilliant. But inside the house, the portrait of perfection cracked. KIMTAEHYUNG, the eldest, was 30 years old. He should have been the pride of the family, the one everyone looked up to. Yet he was the most overlooked. While his siblings thrived under their parents' guidance, he had chosen his own path: fashion design, textiles, colors, and fabrics instead of mergers and contracts. To the Kims, it wasn't ambition, it was rebellion. The second son, Kim V, was his opposite in every way. Confident, charismatic, and business-minded, he was the golden child. At 30, just like Taehyung, he was already steering branches of the family business with ease, adored by his parents and admired by his sisters. When V entered a room, people listened. When Taehyung entered, people asked why he was there. Together, the three siblings V, Jia, and Mia formed the shining core of the Kim empire. They were polished, driven, and everything their parents wanted. And then there was Taehyung. He wasn't hated exactly, just tolerated. He was the shadow at the edge of the family photograph, the one people cropped out when presenting the perfect Kim family to the world. His parents didn't understand him, his siblings mocked him, and even the staff knew better than to expect him at business dinners unless he was dragged along. The Kims were a family of 4 siblings, yes, but only 3 were ever truly counted. The Kim mansion buzzed with an excitement that only came when business and prestige were on the line. The chandeliers glowed brighter than usual. Staff rushed through the halls with silver trays and fresh flowers, and Mrs. Kim's voice echoed from one end of the house to the other, making sure every detail for tomorrow's dinner was flawless. Tomorrow wasn't just a dinner, it was strategy. The Lees were coming. The Lees, Korea's most powerful family after the Kims, and with them, their only daughter, Lee Hwa-eun. If the alliance went as planned, the 2 dynasties would merge into an empire untouchable by competition. Exactly, Mia added. If we play it right, the Lees will practically beg to tie their daughter to our family. Be smart? They don't need to beg. She want this herself. Who wouldn't? Their laughter filled the room, light, polished, rehearsed, like everything else about them. Then came the sound of slow footsteps from the corridor. KIMTAEHYUNG entered, tall and broad-shouldered, his presence impossible to ignore even though the family had perfected the art of doing so. He wore no business suit, just a plain shirt and dark trousers, his long fingers stained faintly with fabric dye from the studio he'd spent the day in. For a moment, silence stretched across the room. "Oh, Hyung," V finally said, his voice dripping with mockery disguised as warmth. "Didn't think you'd show up. We figured you'd be busy with your little fabrics." Mia chuckled behind her hand. "Textiles, wasn't it? How's that going?" "Oh, right, barely surviving." Gia leaned forward, her tone sharper. "You should use tomorrow's dinner as an opportunity, Taehyung. Maybe if you impress Mr. Lee, he'll throw a charity project your way." Their words weren't cruel enough to spark a fight, but just cutting enough to remind him of his place. Mrs. Kim swept into the room then, elegant in her pearl necklace, already rehearsing her smiles for tomorrow. She glanced at Taehyung briefly, then dismissed him just as quickly. Taehyung tried to look presentable tomorrow. No paint stains, no eccentric clothes. This is important. Do you understand? The Lees must see us as one united family, as if they'd ever seen him as part of that unity. Taehyung nodded silently, his jaw tightening. He'd grown used to these subtle humiliations, these constant reminders that in the eyes of his family, he was the weak link. He lowered himself into a chair at the far end of the table, the physical distance matching the emotional gap that had always existed. For the Kims, tomorrow's dinner was about celebration, prestige, and power. For Taehyung, it would be another stage where he'd sit in the background, the forgotten eldest son, watching his family shine while his own worth dimmed under their shadows. The Lee name wasn't just respected in Korea. It was feared, envied, and worshipped across Asia, where the Kims held sway in markets and politics. The Lees dominated industries. Hotels from Dubai to Singapore, tech empires that rivaled Silicon Valley, private jets and ships that carried their crest, the Golden Phoenix, a symbol of power reborn through fire. Mr. Lee, a man with silver hair and an unyielding presence, was known as the Lion of Asia in business circles. Every deal he touched turned to gold. Every competitor that rose against him fell before they could even strike. Mrs. Lee, graceful yet commanding, was the strategist by his side. Together, they weren't just a power couple, they were a dynasty carved into history. But the crown jewel of their empire wasn't the billions in their accounts. It was their only daughter, Lee Hwa-eun. Raised not just with privilege, but with precision, Hwa-eun was more than an heiress. At 27, she had already built her own empire within her families, taking over failing companies and turning them into profit machines, closing deals with nothing but her words and her sharp, hawk-like gaze. Her name carried weight in boardrooms, her beauty turned heads at every gathering. Her intelligence silenced even her father's fiercest rivals. She was called many things, the Iron Rose of Korea for her ability to bloom in elegance yet cut with thorns. A living goddess for her flawless presence, a face sculpted with perfection, eyes that held both fire and wisdom, and a commanding aura that made even seasoned businessmen stutter. Yet behind the grandeur, there was devotion. Mr. and Mrs. Lee's lives revolved around her. They guarded her like treasure, nurtured her like the rarest jewel, and trusted her like no one else. Unlike the Kims, who mocked their eldest son, the Lees worshipped their daughter. She was their pride, their legacy, their everything. And Wuan knew it. She wasn't shy, nor humble about her gifts. She was bold, sharp-tongued when necessary, and terrifyingly intelligent. Men twice her age had walked out of negotiations trembling after facing her smile. Women envied her, men desired her, but no one could deny the truth. She was untouchable. When Wuan entered a room, the air shifted. When she spoke, silence followed. She was elegance wrapped in steel, intellect cloaked in beauty. And tomorrow, she would sit across from the Kims. Tomorrow, the goddess would choose her fate. The dinner table gleamed like a crown jewel that night. Crystal chandeliers dripped golden light over the long mahogany dining table, the clinking of glasses and soft laughter creating a melody of diplomacy. The Kims arrived dressed in silk smiles and velvet words. Mr. Kim spoke like honey dripping from a spoon, smooth, pleasant, coated with false warmth. "Ah, Mr. Lee, Mrs. Lee, what an honor! Truly, this alliance is the talk of the nation. Who wouldn't dream of a partnership with the great Lees?" Beside him, Mrs. Kim nodded with the poise of a well-trained socialite, her voice equally sweet. "Our families share values, respect, tradition, strength. A bond like this will only make us invincible together." The Lees received the flattery with their usual grace. Mr. Lee, dignified and stone-faced, allowed a small nod. Mrs. Lee's sharp eyes softened only when they landed on her daughter, her goddess, her pride. And Wuan, she listened, sharp mind cutting through the polished tactics like a blade. To her, the compliments were expected, rehearsed. Sweetness was just another mask in business. She let them speak, she let them smile, but she wasn't fooled. Her eyes, however, weren't on their lips, they were elsewhere. At the far end of the table, a man sat quietly, almost blending into the background. While his parents spoke honey and his siblings, Gia, Mia, and especially V, threw glances, smirks, and charming winks in her direction, he did none of it. KIMTAEHYUNG, the eldest son, yet the most overlooked, he didn't smile for approval, didn't perform for attention. He ate slowly, almost detached, as if the entire dinner was just another formality he had long stopped caring about. No effort to charm, no empty flattery spilling from his mouth, just silence and quiet dignity. It was strange, in a room full of people scrambling to impress her. It was the man who didn't even try who caught her eye. Wuan leaned back slightly in her chair, pretending to sip her wine, but her gaze lingered. His profile was striking, strong jawline, soft eyes that held stories unspoken, the faintest shadow of weariness. A man carrying battles no one at this table seemed to notice, and for the first time that evening, she was interested. Not in the polished words, not in the charming smirks, but in him. The dinner had flowed with pleasant conversation, business figures wrapped in polite laughter, and an undercurrent of calculation that only the sharpest could sense. It was Mrs. Kim who steered the moment. "Mr. Lee," she began, her voice dripping with conviction, "our families uniting isn't just an alliance, it's destiny. Imagine what the Kims and the Lees can achieve together. A dynasty that no one in Asia could rival." Mr. Lee, with his composed authority, inclined his head. "That has always been our thought as well, my wife and I. We value loyalty, respect, and tradition. The Kims have proven their power over generations. An alliance would only strengthen what we built." Mrs. Lee added warmly, "And our daughter deserves a family just as distinguished as our own." Her proud eyes flickered to Wuan, who sat regal and unbothered, like a goddess overseeing mortals at play. That was the cue Mrs. Kim had been waiting for. Her smile widened. Exactly. And who better for such a radiant young woman than my son, Jungkook? She paused, then corrected sweetly. She gestured toward the younger Kim, whose smirk deepened instantly. They would be perfect, youthful, charming, ambitious, a pair that would not just run businesses, but hearts. The table hummed with approving nods. Mr. Kim chuckled deeply, adding, a union like this? It would be legendary. Confident as ever, leaned back with his trademark smirk, raising his glass subtly in N's direction. His eyes glinted with unspoken challenge, as though he already owned the room, and soon her. But Wyden, who had been quiet, listening, calculating, suddenly let out a soft laugh, sharp, cutting, the kind of sound that silenced a room. She placed her glass down with poise, her eyes glimmering with that dangerous spark everyone in the corporate world feared yet secretly admired. I will marry into your family, she said, voice calm but carrying weight that made the air tighten. Her words seemed to thrill the Kims for a moment. Then her lips curved into a razor-sharp smile. But not this idiot. Every head snapped to her as she flicked her gaze at V, who froze mid-smirk, his cocky expression crumbling into disbelief. Gasps spread around the table. Wyden didn't falter. She lifted her hand, elegant and deliberate, and pointed across the table. I prefer the gentleman here. What? He breathed softly, more to himself than anyone else. The Lees looked shocked but intrigued, Mr. Lee's lips twitching as if hiding a smirk of pride at his daughter's audacity. Mrs. Lee looked at her daughter with a mixture of awe and disbelief. But it was the Kims who sat paralyzed. Mrs. Kim's smile shattered like glass. V's jaw clenched in outrage, his pride bleeding out in front of everyone. And Taehyung. His wide eyes lifted to Wyden, chest tightening with something between fear and an emotion he didn't dare name. The room, once filled with honeyed words, now rang with stunned silence. And in the middle of it sat Wyden Lee, chin high, eyes blazing, owning the moment like the empress she was. The silence after Wyden's declaration was broken only by the faint clinking of silverware, until Mrs. Kim's voice sliced through the air. Her laugh was sharp, brittle. Oh, sweetheart, surely you're joking. V is the better choice, handsome, charismatic, already polished for the world. Taehyung, she cast a pointed glance at her eldest. He's kind, yes, but he isn't fit to stand beside a woman like you. V leaned forward, anger hidden beneath a strained smirk. Why then, don't be ridiculous. You're blinded by politeness. Everyone knows I'm the one who can match you. He threw a mocking look at Taehyung, can barely run his little shop. Taehyung's jaw tightened, his knuckles whitening around his fork, but he said nothing. He had learned long ago silence was his shield, but Wyden's gaze was unwavering, sharp as a blade. I don't need a man to match me, she said coolly. I need a man who respects me. And I've made my choice. Mrs. Kim's smile cracked, desperation bleeding through. Mr. Lee, you don't understand. V and Wyden together will be unstoppable. But Mr. Lee, who had been silent, finally spoke. His voice was calm but thunderous in its finality. Madam Kim, my daughter is not a pawn. She has given her verdict. His eyes locked with hers, cold and immovable. If you want an alliance with the Lees, it will be through your eldest son, Taehyung. Otherwise, there will be no alliance at all. The words hit the table like an earthquake. Mrs. Lee's hand rested proudly on Wyden's, her eyes shining with approval. Mrs. Kim's breath hitched, outrage and panic fighting in her chest. She looked at her husband, her lips parting to argue, but the weight of the room silenced her. Mr. Kim's face had gone pale. He understood the stakes better than anyone. The Lees weren't just wealthy, they were Asia's crown jewel, the untouchable empire every corporation envied. Losing them would cripple future expansions. He inhaled deeply, his eyes flickering between his sons, one burning with fury, the other stunned into stillness. With a voice that shook slightly but carried the weight of his decision, he finally said, Very well. If Taehyung is her choice, then Taehyung it is. The table exhaled collectively. V's hand slammed against the wood, his composure shattering. Jia and Mia exchanged a look, both rolling their eyes at the theatrics, and Taehyung sat frozen, breath shallow, as the reality of what just happened crashed into him.